Welcome to today's presentation on the HOPWA formula grant. This presentation will demystify our understandings of the formula and the factors that impact the formula. My name is Alejandro Gongora. I'm a fund allocation analyst at the Department of Housing, Urban Development, Office of Community Planning and Development, and I'll be presenting this information. Let's begin. The HOPWA Formula Grant Award is calculated to benefit some grantees more than others. This is a myth. HOPWA Formula Grant Program awards based on laws and regulations laid out by statute. The HOPWA Formula Grant is an entitlement grant program. This means that the program provides annual grants on a formula basis to entitled state and local entities of government. So you may ask yourself, how is a grantee's HOPWA formula grant amount calculated? As mentioned, allocations are based on statutory formula defined by federal law. Grant awards are calculated for all eligible grantees that qualify for a grant award. The process for calculating grant awards consists of the following. 1. Update formula datasets annually in order to identify newly eligible and non-eligible metropolitan statistical areas. 2. Calculate the variables for all eligible grantees. Variables consist of living HIV cases, living AIDS cases, poverty rate, fair market rent standard or FMR, and two weighted factors, poverty cases and FMR cases. 3. Determine the dollar amount for each variable. 4. Calculate the grant amount with stop-loss measure based on the shares from the previous year and adjust it to the budget. 5. Conduct quality assurance, quality control, collect reviews, approvals from program offices, and announce. Some of this information might not be new to you, and instead, you would like to know what factors impact a grantee's grant award. Well, there are 4 factors that impact a grantee's award. These factors are 1. Large budget increases and decreases. 2. Shares from the previous year allocated. 3. The stop-loss measure of no more than 10% increase and no less than 5% decrease in award amount based on the shares from the previous year. And 4. Data updates. This is our agenda for today. We will explore these 4 factors so that you are able to understand why grant allocations vary frequently. The first factor is the budget. A grant award can reflect when there is a dramatic increase or decrease to the budget. When grantees share, let's say, a total budget of $100 one year, and the next year there is a large shift in the budget with an increase of $300, that means we can expect everyone to receive more money in the second year. But if the budget decreases to $50, then we can expect everyone to receive less money. Similarly, we can see this when the ocean tide rises. All boats also rise. But when the tide goes down, so do all the boats. The second factor is shares from the previous year. In this example, we see fiscal year 30 has a budget of $2 million, shared among 7 grantees. There are 7 slices of the pie for each grantee. Those 7 grantees share the whole pie, and you can see their slice with their respective proportion, 15%, 25%, 10%, etc. In fiscal year 31, the 7 grantees receive the same proportion as they did in fiscal year 30. You can see the percentages mirror each other. While the budget in fiscal year 31 decreased by $1 million, those 7 grantees still received the same share or proportion as the previous year. Let's look at this differently. Let's look at the same example, but dollars instead of percentages. If we look at dollars instead of percentages, the grant award decreases in the second year, but maintains the same ratio of 2 to 1. The grantee with $30,000 in the first year received $15,000 in the second year. The grantee with $50,000 in the first year received $25,000 in the second year, and so on. Each grantee received the same share as the previous year, even though the budget changed in the second year. This leads us to our third factor. The third factor is the stop-loss measure. This measure maintains a grant award within a floor and ceiling for 5 years. That way, grantees do not receive an allocation increase greater than 10% or a decrease of less than 5% based on the shares of the previous year. You can picture a grantee's share getting allocated within this floor and ceiling as shown in the graphic. You may be wondering, why is the 5-year stop loss beneficial? As we are all aware, a new formula was adopted in fiscal year 17. So we want to consider any volatile shifts that may occur from shifting to a new formula. Data updates is the fourth factor and also the reason why the stop-loss measure minimizes the potential volatile shift in funding for grantees. For instance, the new data can potentially generate different total cases. In last year's old formula, 75% of the formula total, let's call this the 75% pot, pertained to historical AIDS cases, both living and deceased. The remaining 25% pot pertained to per capita incidence rate. Meanwhile, in this year's new formula, 75% pertains to living HIV and living AIDS cases. 12.5% pertains to FMR cases, and 12.5% pertains to poverty cases. Notice how these factors differ immensely. Moreover, the 25% pot from the old formula benefited 31 jurisdictions. In the new formula, however, all 141 jurisdictions may potentially receive funding from the equivalent pot, that is, the two 12.5% pots. Let's see an example to visualize the update to the data. In this hypothetical example, we'll see how the grantee has different total eligible cases across the two formulas. These two pie charts show a grantee's total eligible cases in the old formula from the last year versus eligible cases in the new formula from this year. This grantee last year had a total of 50 living AIDS cases, shown in orange. They also had 50 AIDS cases that were deceased, shown in blue. Moving over to this year's new formula, we see three major distinctions. First, there is no longer a blue component. Second, the orange component is no longer orange. It has changed to brown. This brown component now sums the living AIDS cases and living HIV cases. Third, while this grantee has an increase in living cases, their total still decreased from last year by 30. If we take a step back and look at these two pie charts as dollars instead of cases, we can understand that the shift from 100 cumulative AIDS cases to 70 living HIV and AIDS cases could create volatile shifts in funding. What does funding look like for grantees going into the new formula without stop loss? Let's call this scenario without stop loss Scenario 1. In Scenario 1, grantees could potentially experience steep decreases or increases without the stop-loss measure. Grantee A in blue shows a downward trend line indicating a decrease of $250 from old to new formula. Grantee B in orange shows an upward trend line indicating an increase in $200 from the old to new formula. This potential dramatic shift can be explained by the pie charts comparing total eligible cases shown previously. Note that these trend lines represent the shift from one year to the next. Remember this for the next scenario. So what does funding look like for grantees going into the new formula with stop loss? Let's call this scenario with stop loss scenario 2. In scenario 2 with stop loss, we can note that grantees experience smaller, steady changes in funding as shown by the orange and blue trend lines. This chart shows how the stop loss measure prevents grantees from losing less than 5% or gaining more than 10% across the 5 years. The grantees in scenario 2 still arrive to $400 and $250 grant awards like in scenario 1, but they arrive there after 5 years. Let's compare the two scenarios side by side. Immediately, we see that these two scenarios differ. Note that in both scenarios, both grantees arrive to grant awards of $400 and $250 in the new formula year. Specifically, scenario 1 without stop loss has a dramatic shift from one year to the next. Scenario 2 smooths out the dramatic shift across 5 years. Additionally, we see that scenario 2 mitigates the change in funding level in the last year when the new formula is fully implemented. Let's look closer at this last year. When implementing scenario 1 with no stop loss, we see grantee A loses $250 or 50% of their funding. Meanwhile, in scenario 2, after 5 years with stop loss, grantee A loses $137 or 35% of their funding. Likewise, grantee B gains 100% of their funding level in scenario 1 and gains 24% in scenario 2. In sum, the impact isn't as severe in the full implementation year of the stop loss method as it is in the full implementation without the stop loss. So you may ask yourself, if grant awards are calculated with stop loss based on shares from the previous year, can grantees estimate the grant award for following years? In order to estimate grant awards for the following years, the person calculating the grant awards would need to know key information. 1. Which jurisdictions are newly eligible and not eligible this year? 2. Update data sources for total living HIV and living AIDS cases, fair market rents for every jurisdiction, poverty estimates for every jurisdiction. 3. Calculate grant awards for all eligible jurisdictions. The person calculating cannot calculate for just one jurisdiction. 4. What are the budget estimates for those preceding years? Needless to say, estimating grant awards for following years is difficult to do with 100% certainty. Let's take a different approach and look at an example called Scenario 3, where we look at grant awards retrospectively. In this hypothetical example, Scenario 3, we see the same orange and blue grantees from before. However, this time we are looking at their actual grant award amounts and not estimates. Note that this Scenario 3 does not look identical to Scenario 2. Why? If we look at the red dotted lines, we can see that there are 3 factors that have potentially affected the projections for both grantees. First, the grant awards for these two grantees increase going into fiscal year 31. Second, their awards decrease going into fiscal year 34. Third, their awards under the new formula are no longer 400 and 250. They change to 380 and 275 respectively. What are the 3 potential factors that could have impacted the grantees' grant awards? Here are 3 potential answers. First, the budget increased significantly from fiscal year 30 to fiscal year 31. Second, the budget was shared with newly eligible grantees in fiscal year 34. Third, the data for eligible living cases FMR cases, and poverty cases updated to new amounts by fiscal year 36. In sum, consider all factors that may impact a grantee's grant award. Today we reviewed the 4 factors that explain why grant allocations vary. 1. Budget increases or decreases, especially large shifts in funding, can impact grant awards for all grantees. 2. Shares from the previous year ensure that the budget is shared among all eligible grantees accordingly. 3. Stop-loss measure prevents grantees from losing less than 5% and gaining no more than 10%. 4. Data updates are published annually. If you have any questions pertaining to the information covered in this presentation, you may email your questions to formula_helpdesk@hud.gov. Thank you for your interest in this presentation. This concludes the HOPWA Formula Grant Mythbuster presentation.